If you enjoyed the channel and our video content and would like to support us, you can do this in a couple of ways. You can sign up to our Patreon site, which is a monthly subscription to one of our 4 tiers, each giving you something different from early access interviews up to exclusive unseen footage. There's also the option of a one-off donation via PayPal, which allows you the option to donate an amount of your choice. Both options really help to keep this channel going and to continue putting out regular content for you good folk. So please take a look at aircrewinterview.tv/donate, and I thank you in advance. Thank you and enjoy. So Rosie, when did you become interested in aviation?
So I first became interested when I was about 12 years old. My dad kind of got me really interested in aviation. He used to drag me to air shows when I was little, and I think probably when I was a bit younger, I was probably, to be honest, a little bit bored by them because he took me to so many. But I suppose it did start to sow a few little seeds, like hearing fast jets and the loud noises. And, you know, as a kid, you just want to put your fingers in your ears, but actually, as you grow up, you realise you've got an interest in it. And he encouraged me to join the Air Cadets, and which I did. And as soon as I did, I went flying, did my first trip in in fact, it would have been a Chipmunk.
Nice.
And I just loved it from like the first time I ever went flying. Just the fact that you could go and get airborne, get above the clouds, go and see some blue sky, the sense of freedom that it gave you. And so I think from that moment on, everything I did was around trying to get myself a seat in a cockpit. And so I went to university, studied aerospace engineering, because at the time it was the most relevant degree you could do. Might not have made that choice now with the other options available, but yeah, I went and joined my university air squadron, and yeah, again, I just really loved it. At that point, I think my heart wasn't necessarily set on joining the Air Force because I failed the medical. My arms weren't long enough to be a pilot. I was too small, I was too light, so I had to put on about 1.5 stone, I think, in weight.
Oh, really?
At the time, yeah, and I tried to grow my arms, but that didn't work. And so basically, it was my university air squadron boss who really encouraged me to join the Air Force. But he said, you know, you might have to readjust your gyros, basically. And he encouraged me to go for nav because I passed the medical for that, and my aptitude was better for it as well. So yeah, I went through basically went and joined as a navigator, and I didn't look back. Sort of left the Air Force, went on to join the left the university air squadron, went on to join the Air Force. The year I left university was actually 2001, so it was 9/11. And at the same time, my heart was set on becoming a pilot, and so I was applying to the airlines, but then they all closed down all of their sponsorship schemes because of 9/11. And actually, I got accepted into the Air Force 2 days after, on the 13th of September. So I got accepted in as a navigator, and I just thought, you know what, I think it really kind of made me feel like there was purpose to what I was doing. I think it really kind of, with the aviation industry being in a state it was, and then seeing it just completely collapse pretty much overnight, a bit like COVID really, and then just going on and joining the Air Force as a navigator, it was just amazing.
And you wanted to go fast jet at this point, or did you want to go like heavies or anything?
When I first joined, I had a couple of ideas. One of them was to go fast jet, and the other one I quite wanted to be a TAC nav on Hercs. Okay. But when I went through training, they said, no, you're going to go fast. Well, like, you know, just be prepared that you might not.
Yeah.
It just depends on what slots are available. So we'll see where you end up. But as I started to go through training, I was like, yeah, actually, I like the idea of going fast. So.
And what was some of the aircraft you were training on as a nav to go F3?
So when we started off on the Tutor. I was going to say the Bulldog then. I was like thinking through my university air squadron. So we started off on the Tutor. So we did probably a couple of months on the Tutor, just the real basic stuff, the basic navigation. So when we first started, there was no sat nav. It was all compass, stopwatch, and a map. And I think that was probably one of the biggest things is just, you know, that's the real raw navigation, and just getting used to it. So yeah, we started off on the Tutor. And then as we progressed through, we then went on to the Tucano and essentially sort of almost doubled the speed. But people sometimes say, like, hey, you know, how do you cope with that as you go through the different aircraft types? And I would say to them, you know, it's not, you'd have to work twice as fast, but you do adjust your work cycle. So you're still doing fuel checks every 10 minutes. So actually your work cycle is is actually fairly similar, but you just adjust it for that faster speed for you to do different things. So yeah, we went onto the Tucano and were there probably, so we started off at RAF Cranwell on the Tutor, then moved to RAF Linton on Ouse for the Tucano. I did the ground school in the same place, and then after we'd finished on the Tucano, so we probably spent about 3 months, I think we did about 30 sorties there. Then we went back to Cranwell again. So it was like every 3 months I was kind of moving home, I guess.
Yeah.
With the nav training system as it was there, they were quite short little cycles really. Went back to Cranwell again, back onto the Domini this time.
Oh,
and that was
Domini.
yeah, and that was the first kind of introduction to, I guess, Doppler radar and these green blobs, and just trying to make sense of something completely different. So going from map, compass, stopwatch to a little bit of radar work. So yeah, and then at the end of that phase, so that was again probably another 2 or 3 months. We then got streamed. So.
And did you know you wanted to go to F3, or did you want to go GR?
Well, at that point, it wasn't. It was just streamed onto Fast Jet, so I didn't know.
Right,
yeah, so we got streamed. I got streamed onto Fast Jet. I think about 6 of us got jets, and I think 3 got multis on my course. And then basically went back onto the Domini again. So did a bit more work there, and then went onto the Hawk afterwards, up to RAF Leeming, which was just amazing because we were with 100 Squadron. Oh, yeah. So that as it was then, the NTU, the Navigator training unit, was with 100 Squadron, and the brilliant thing about it was that yes, you're on a course and you're a student on the squadron, but you were also able to just go flying with any one of the squadron pilots. Yeah. So it was a real pinch yourself squadron to be on, because not only that, but there were detachments, there were landaways to different places. You could put your name down and sign up on the wall, and you could find yourself over to France for the weekend or wherever it may be. So it was just an amazing squadron, and also you got exposed to loads of different types of flying. So you could go and look at the flying program in the morning, and there was a bit of a bun fight between us studes at the time, because it'd be like, right, who's going to be able to sign up? That's a really jammy trip. Let's go and try and get on that one. Mm-hmm. So you'd be trying to sign yourself up just to get different exposure to different types of flying quite early on. So it was brilliant. So I spent almost a year there. And in fact, it was quite an interesting time, because you got streamed sort of halfway through. So that was where you found out if you were going onto fighters or ground attack. And in fact, that's the first time I met Helen, because she was actually at my streaming. I didn't realise at the time, but that was when we were basically doing a few different drinks, and then finding out basically where we were going to end up. So I think I was dressed as Catwoman at the time. I think they dressed. I was slightly stitched up. The guys were all. They said, right, you've all got to dress up as superheroes, and they'd given us different things to do. But I was trying to find this giant cat outfit that was like a domestic cat, but unfortunately couldn't find one. That was a bit disappointing.
Yeah.
But,
so let's talk about your time on the F3. What were your first thoughts on the aircraft?
So when I got to the F3, I got to the operational conversion unit. Did ground school at RAF Coningsby, so spent about 6 weeks doing the ground school, learning the systems, quite a bit of time in the simulator. So about 6 weeks there, and then moved from ground school up to RAF Lucas. So the operational conversion unit, that was a real step change, I think, having been on the Hawk. So the Hawk, one of the biggest challenges, I guess, particularly when I got streamed air defence, was air sickness. No. From doing, I guess, a lot of BFM basic fighting manoeuvres and moving on to air combat, and it just, I got quite a lot of air. That was kind of one of the biggest challenges that I was working with. But you just became desensitised to it and worked through it. Mm-hmm. But then on the Tornado, I think there was just such a step change in terms of the radar was like nothing I'd seen previously. And I think the learning curve was really steep just because of that, because the cockpit was just so different to anything that we'd used before, just because obviously the technology just wasn't there in the Hawk. We did eventually get a sat-nav in the Hawk. We got a bolt-on
I've seen that.
that we could use. But it was just a complete step change going into the Tornado. And I think, again, one of the biggest challenges when you go through the conversion unit is that you'd go out to the jet in the morning or the afternoon or whenever, and the configuration was sometimes different in the back, and then, I'm sure similar things in the front, but you might have a different mark of radio, or the radio might be moved in a slightly different location, and you just think, just getting to grips with the cockpit, and then it's like, I've got a different cockpit. And so that was, again, it was not only this learning curve of all the systems and starting to, understand how to operate them, but it was then the fact that the configuration was different, and there was just a lot to take in.
And can you remember your first reheat takeoff? That must have been a big power difference coming from the Hawk.
Oh, massive. And I think, just even watching a reheat takeoff, I can remember being on the Hawk, watching a jet takeoff in reheat in the dark and just thinking, wow, I want to do this. And I think first trip was a reheat takeoff, and just sitting in your seat and just feeling yourself, sort of jolt back and then sort of rumble down the runway. But there wasn't much time to be thinking, oh wow, this is a big deal, because straight away your head is in, you're looking at the instruments, you're reading the speed, you're monitoring everything that's going on, you're monitoring gear flaps and all of the systems. So people sometimes say, what were you afraid? And it's like there wasn't time to think about that. You had a job to do, and so you were very focused on what you were doing.
Was it a busy cockpit, and did it feel modern when you were going onto it?
I don't know about, it was a busy cockpit, yeah. I don't know about modern. It was certainly different, but you kind of knew that things were changing so quickly. There were elements of the jet, and even jet to jet, it could be very different in terms of the radio setup, and some would look more modern than others. But yeah, definitely it was. I wouldn't say it necessarily felt modern, but it just felt there was just a lot of different instrumentation and TV tabs and things to interact with, which previously we just hadn't used. So yeah, but my second ever trip on the Tornado, we actually had a hydraulic failure. So straight away, it was kind of like into emergency drills, and it was everything that we'd done in the sim. So there were no big surprises there. It was just like, right, let's just do what you normally do. The biggest thing though was taking the cable, because that was something that you can't really simulate. So that was quite exciting. The guys on my course said, yeah, we all came out to watch you land just to see if you crashed. So that was really supportive of them, I thought.
Lovely.
Yeah.
So what was your first frontline squadron?
So 25 Squadron. I went to 25 Squadron in 2005. I pitched up on the Monday. I flew with the boss on the Tuesday, and on the Thursday I fired my first Sky Flash. Yeah.
What was that like?
That was amazing. I mean, it was one of those kind of pinch yourself moments, because it was MPC, so Missile Practice Camp, and it's something that I guess everyone on the squadron's waiting for. And I was just very fortunate in that with the timing that I got onto the squadron, it happened to coincide with when they were running this camp. But because I was quite junior, and obviously I was the baby nav, I'd only been on the squadron a couple of days, I wasn't really expecting to participate, and certainly not that quickly. I was expecting to do my, combat ready workup and all of the syllabus, and maybe do some of the more boring stuff. But no, the boss just chucked me straight in there and said, you're in this alpha male environment, you've got to prove yourself. So yeah, I was put straight on with one of the first tourist junior pilots as well. So that was brilliant.
Did the Sky Flash actually work then?
It did.
No snags?
Well, no, it did work, but actually I was under a bit of pressure, because he had flown with another nav the day before, and they'd actually had a hung missile. So he was then, in fact, he wanted to fly with a QY, so he wanted to fly with one of the qualified weapons instructors. And the boss was like, no, just take Rosie. Because, it'd be cool she needs to learn too. So take her off. And so we went off and flew this missile together. But yeah, I definitely felt pressure, because I knew that things could go wrong. And I knew that he was definitely feeling the pressure because of what had happened before as well. So yeah, they're quite high stakes, because they're obviously worth a lot of money. So we really wanted to get it right.
So was there like an average flying day on 25? Would you be flying every day? Would you be conducting DACT? What would you be doing?
Well, I think probably I wouldn't know about an average flying day, but not quite flying every day. Probably, it varied month on month, just depending on what was going on. But you're probably looking at sort of 2 to 3 times a week was what we were probably doing. There was quite a bit of quick reaction alert in there as well. So a lot of training for that, because 2005 when I joined, obviously it wasn't that long after 9/11. So it was still quite twitchy at that time, and you could get signed off to do quick reaction alert before you were combat ready. So I did quite a bit of that before I was even combat ready. So I guess the average day there was no real 2 days that looked the same, if I'm honest. Every day was different, and that was the beauty of it. That's what we all loved, is the variety and the excitement and the challenge as well, because you were always learning new things, always learning new skills. And even on a transit sortie, you could learn lessons that you wouldn't have imagined. So Things can go wrong at any point. So yeah, there wasn't really an average day. It was just, you know, we'd have surge days every now and then, and on a surge day, you would hope to go air-to-air refuelling and just get as much time airborne as possible. It was just there to purely get some hours on the jets and get experience doing different things. So,
did you ever intercept any like foreign aircraft on cue or anything like that?
No, so a lot of time sat in the chair on cue. But actually, at the time I was on 25 Squadron, there was a lot of twitchiness about 9/11 and hijacked airliners. But at the time, in terms of foreign aircraft coming in, so particularly Russians, it was very quiet. And actually, the year that I left, 2007, was just as things were hotting up again. So obviously, I was desperate to go and intercept something, but no, with the Russians, nothing. Just because, unfortunately, with the timing that I was on, it was just at that time where they were starting to get a bit more interested, and there were more intercepts happening. But yeah, I was gutted not to.
And did you ever fly on any large exercises on the F3?
So I went out to Malaysia, exercise flying fish, and so with F-18s out there with Malaysian Air Force, and there were GR4s out with us. So yeah, it was quite a big, not a huge exercise, but it was a good and interesting experience just to go up against different aircraft and be part of, I guess, with your squadron and bigger planning exercises. So that's the biggest sort of detached, the furthest I went, but then to be fair, that is the other side of the world. So it was interesting getting there as well, getting the jets over in stages. So it was, that was a great one to do.
Were there Su-30s there at the time? Or was it just Hornets?
That is a good question. I remember the Hornets. I don't remember the Su-30s so much.
But you went up against the Hornets.
Yeah.
How did you fare?
Well, I guess with the F3, you know, the real sort of strengths of it are more sort of beyond visual range or at range. So in terms of the missile systems, in terms of what we could do with the radar, but the weaker elements were sort of more in the sort of visual arena. So in terms of air combat, it's not necessarily going to hold its own so well against some of the other fighters. But yeah, you kind of hoped that in the exercise scenario you could kill them essentially before you got to that point as a method of last resort.
And being on 25, would you mix with the other F3 squadrons, or are you completely separate?
So at the time there was 11 Squadron when I first joined, and then that's disbanded. I mean, it was just 25 at the end at RAF Liming. So you would, you would mix in the socially definitely, but on a day-to-day basis, you were kind of quite separate really as your squadrons, doing separate tasking, separate command chain, so physically located.
So each squadron was
separate squadrons.
Different.
So yeah, each squadron was slightly different, a bit of rivalry between squadrons, but yeah, you didn't really cross over loads on a sort of daily basis.
Would you work with the Americans out of Lakenheath, or was that quite a rare thing?
I didn't do much work with the Americans out of Lakenheath, no. Not while I was on 25.
For themselves.
Yeah, I guess it just depended on what their tasking was, and I did a little bit when I was on 100 Squadron, but only not a huge amount.
What's the fastest you've been in an F3?
So 1.91 Mach. Wow. Which was actually with Dave Southwood, who I know volunteers here. But it was basically when I was at Boscombe Down. So flying with Dave was with ETPS, and he just said one day, "Do you want to see how fast we can go?" And I was like, "Let's do it." And I think we went up to 37,000 feet, and up to 1.91. We were going to see if we could get that was the fastest we could get. The jet was shaking, like. In your car, not that you'll go that fast, but everything shakes. Yeah. And I was thinking, I hope we don't have to bang out.
Yeah, exactly. So Rosie, can you share any memorable stories from your time on the F3?
There's a couple really. I mean, one of them would be Quick Reaction Alert, where, as I say, things were quite twitchy around the time that I was on Quick Reaction Alert, and there was a memorable occasion back in 2006 because there was a big terrorist plot to blow up multiple airliners across the Atlantic. And I was actually on Quick Reaction Alert on that day. So one of the most memorable bits of that day was actually trying to get to Quick Reaction Alert because we fly down in a Cessna, which was chartered by the Air Force, piloted by 2 civilians. So the poor things had 4 tornado crews out behind them, breathing down their necks. So I did used to feel quite sorry for them. But they, on that day, they basically omitted to feed the fuel correctly, and we basically felt like we were going to fall out of the sky. And I can remember one of the other navs sat opposite me went completely white, because it was horrible. It felt like we'd had a catastrophic engine failure. And that was before we even got to Q. And then when we got there, as they were taxiing in, they nearly hit the wing on a fence as well. So it was quite, before we'd even started the shift, it was, we felt a bit on edge. But actually that day, we were wondering what we're going to get airborne or whatever, but actually all of UK airspace got closed down. So no one went flying that day, which was, it was a really interesting time, and quite I guess a bit stressful, because you were thinking, well, what on earth is going to happen and what's going to happen next? And quick reaction alert is twitchy anyway without a situation like that. And all I was hearing about it was on the radio at the time and what was going on the news. So that was one occasion. And I think probably out in the Falklands was another one where I was flying with one of the pilots, and it just happened the year that I was out there. It happened to coincide with the 25th anniversary of the end of the Falklands War. And so they had asked if we could, some veterans had asked if we could do a fly past. And the pilot that I was flying with, we were sort of discussing, from the plant, they said something low and fast. So we were like, okay. So we basically went over them. It turned out we came up from behind a hill, came up behind them. We were flying very low, very fast in reheat. And after we did it, we sort of peered back, and we were like, oh, do we think they enjoyed that? And we were like, yeah, we think they enjoyed that. Obviously, we didn't really have any real way of knowing. And we were like, should we do it again? Oh. And so we went round and we did it again. And then after we did the second time, we were sort of congratulating. And then we were like, really hope that landed well, and that's what they wanted. But we weren't sure. And after we landed, the squadron boss met us, and we were like, oh, okay, this is going to go one of two ways. It's either gone really well or really badly. And luckily, he shook our hands and said they were so pleased with that. Like, that's exactly what they wanted. And without, they said that it was really evocative. But we were a bit worried that it might have gone the other way.
What a sight that would have been.
Yeah, I mean, it felt good from the jet. Okay. And you can get that sense. You can almost hear like the roar behind you. So it's it was really fantastic to be part of it, and special as well to be asked to do it.
So how many hours did you get on the Tornado, and I'm guessing you enjoyed your time on it?
So on Tornado, I got about 600 or 700. So essentially did a tour on 25, went off to become an instructor with a 100 Squadron and the WISO training unit as it was, and then I went back to 41 Squadron. So I was doing BV RAM trials then, so beyond visual range air-to-air missile, Meteor, but I was doing it on the Tornado. So I got a bit more time on the Tornado again.
Oh, was a Tornado on 41?
Yeah, so I was on a detached flight at Boscombe Down.
Okay.
So this was 2010 to 12. So yeah, there was a detached flight. So there was just a small flight of Tornadoes operating as part of an experimental unit, basically. So detached from 41. So 41 was up at RAF Coningsby, but yeah, I was down at Boscombe Down with just two 2/3 pilots doing the trials with. Yeah, it was really good. I mean, the best thing about being at Boscombe as well was because I was with Empire Test Pilot School, again, they just had this program where it's like, right, what should I do today? So I ended up flying on the Tornado F3, Tornado GR4, Alpha Jet, Hawk, Harvard. I could look in my logbook and I was like, wow, in 1 week I've ticked off 3 or 4 aircraft types. So again, that was just an incredible job to have. And a really exciting one too, because we were involved in missile firings too. So
I have to ask as well, like, could you tell the difference between the GR4 and the F3 in the back seat?
From a flying, as in from the
just even
performance-wise?
Yeah, performance-wise, or were they pretty much
I mean, not hugely. I wasn't in the GR4. We were tending to do, I was flying with them, but we were tending to do more sort of transits between different air bases and things. Whereas the Tornado, I mean, to be honest, at the time, the Tornado, the hours were very limited on the jet, and the fatigue life on it. We had to be quite careful. We were G limited. I think we were limited to about 4G at that time, just because the jet had basically gone out of service with the squadrons, and so we were being kept sort of flying beyond that time. So yeah, we had to be quite careful with what we were doing. But the fun flying came in the Alpha Jets and the Hawks. That's where we
little sports cars.
Yeah, Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, we got some personal ones here if you're happy to answer them, Rosie.
Of course, yeah.
So, do you have any hobbies?
Hobbies? Yeah, I love running. That's one of them. I'm going out with my dog, as in on runs, because she's a Springer dog, got lots of energy. So that's probably one of the main things. Come rain or shine, I'm out on the mall running with her. She doesn't give me any days off, so yeah, even when I want to put my feet up, I'm quite often out with her. So that's probably one of the main ones. But yeah, I've got 2 kids as well, so it's mostly about their hobbies, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's what do they want to do, and then I facilitate that for them. So yeah, they do all sorts of stuff that I'm always like, oh yeah, I wish I was swimming and skiing and doing all these things, but they're off doing all that.
Yeah.
So they're probably the main things. Yeah, family life. Yeah.
Brilliant. Favourite aircraft you have flown?
Well, I would say Tornado, actually, just because I think for me it was just this real sense of, I suppose, power, but also from a nav's perspective, there was just so much more to do and get involved with in the cockpit, and you could really sort of use everything more tactically. So that was probably my favourite.
One you would like to fly, either past or present?
Do you know, I'd have loved to have got a trip in a Typhoon. I was trying to organise it with Helen before I left the Air Force, because it would have just been great to compare the two things, but it just never, the stars never quite aligned with that, so I never quite got to do it, which is a shame.
And finally, can we find yourself online?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn under Nick Rosie Steevenson. And also got a website, the same one with Helen, as we've set up our company On a Mission. So it's www.weareonamission.co.uk.
Brilliant stuff. Well, Rosie, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.